New York's Attorney General is suing President Trump and his 3 children, alleging the Donald J. Trump Foundation has violated federal law. The president is calling the lawsuit, quote, ridiculous, but the Attorney General wants Mr. Trump to pay millions in penalties and reimbursements. Here's Anna Werner.
The lawsuit filed today says Mr. Trump ran the foundation according to his whim rather than the law. It describes the foundation as little more than an empty shell with a board that hasn't met in 19 years. The complaint cites a series of transactions that New York Attorney General Barbara Underwood says benefited Mr. Trump's own interests, an illegal practice known as self-dealing. There was the $100,000 payment to Fisher House Foundation to settle legal claims against Mr. Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort, and the $10,000 of Trump Foundation money the suit says Mr. Trump used to buy a painting of himself.
Everybody's going to get a lot of money.
And the AG pointed to this campaign event in Iowa in January 2016. Candidate Trump, skipping a Republican debate, raised millions of dollars for veterans instead. But after the event, the lawsuit says campaign staff, not the Trump Foundation, dictated how the funds were dispersed, amounting to illegal coordination between a campaign and nonprofit. The president fired back on Twitter, saying the sleazy New York Democrats are suing him on a foundation that gave out to charity more money than it took in. And he added, I won't settle this case. But former IRS Charitable Division head Mark Cohen says the evidence against the foundation appears overwhelming.
This one is extraordinary because of the visibility of what happened. Literally, videotape exists of the events constituting political campaign intervention, for example.
The Trump Foundation itself claims that the president himself or through his companies has contributed more than $8 million. They called the lawsuit politics at its very worst. But Elaine, the Attorney General wants the foundation dissolved and a court order to force the president and his 3 oldest children to pay penalties and restitution.
Anna Werner, thank you. Emily Compagno is a former federal attorney. She joins me now from Seattle. Emily, this lawsuit alleges the president's foundation was, quote, self-dealing. How serious are these allegations?
These are very serious. There's basically 3 silos that the DOJ, or that the, New York AG is arguing here. And one is that $2.8 million, that it was illegally dispersed, right? And that it was basically used to benefit the campaign. And the second silo involves self-benefiting transactions. The third involves fiduciary duty of the board, which, as you stated a moment ago, is Donald Trump's children. So allegedly, what New York is arguing here is that they breached their duties, that it was essentially just a checkbook, the AG's term, that it wasn't operating really as a true charity. And note that the seriousness here lies in part with the referrals. The AG sent 2 referrals to both the IRS and the FEC, the Federal Election Committee, alleging and arguing that they have violated those laws. So that's what's so serious here.
Well, the suit alleges the foundation was used to curry political favor for Mr. Trump. What could this mean for the president and his administration?
I think this, honestly, is quite a serious allegation and could have tremendous consequences here, because this could essentially be the straw that broke the camel's back. We've seen from a lot of different areas, including Michael Cohen, for example, there are hints and allegations and investigations toward potential campaign finance violations. So here, again, the New York State AG seems very confident that there was such violations. It remains to be seen what the FEC, in fact, does with their own investigation and conclusion. But here, at a minimum, the allegations are quite serious and would have serious consequences. I note, too, that the AG herself said it's basically become her greatest kind of honor to pursue this, her greatest priority, which there speaks to kind of a political bent as well.
Well, the president said on Twitter he won't settle the case. How will we see this proceed?
It will play out in the courts, essentially, in front of in front of the courts. And really what they're arguing here is not only the dissolution, but the payback of those funds as well as fines. And note that in the early stages of the investigation, the board and the foundation paid excise taxes on a few of the transactions and refunded the money from then Donald Trump's personal monies back into the foundation, but not covering all of the transactions in questions. So that right there tells you a little bit that there are truths from the board's perspective to what the AG here alleges, but it remains to be seen with those fines and that dissolution as well, barring the children and Donald Trump himself from serving on charitable boards for 1 and 10 years respectively. Those are serious consequences.
Switching gears, the Wall Street Journal is reporting prosecutors are investigating if the president's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, engaged in secret lobbying. What exactly does that mean?
It means that if you rise to a certain percentage of your time as a lobbyist, if you raise a certain amount of money, that you have to register as a lobbyist. So it's kind of the letter of the law, basically. So if one is participating as a lobbyist but not registering as one, then they're in violation of those laws. Note as well that if you lobby foreign nationals, foreign governments, then it toes the line of the emoluments clause. And so right there, that also raises eyebrows. Here we're now hearing that the investigation team has been contacting AT&T and Novartis on behalf of this investigation to confirm basically how much, if any, was Michael Cohen lobbying, and again, if it rises to the level of registration, which he failed to do, then he's in further trouble.
So what could that mean for the special counsel's investigation?
Well, they're separate here, but they work in tandem. So what it would mean is that information could and would likely be shared, and also that it has consequences across all the boards. So I think it's important for viewers to understand that while there are separate lanes in the investigation, ultimately the information can be shared, and it's not that if one has purview over it, it prevents another from jurisdiction over it, depending on what the underlying substance is.
Well, this comes as sources tell our Jeff Pegues that Cohen is feeling increasingly isolated from the president and his allies. What are your thoughts on that?
It's interesting. I think it's for viewers to understand when you are the subject of an investigation, it is by nature incredibly isolating. We've seen in other investigations, actually, even your conversations and communications are highly scrutinized. Who are you reaching out to and what are you saying? Certainly there's kind of a birth as well that people tend to have arm's length. We've seen that even on the corporate side with corporations that had contracts with Michael Cohen dissing themselves, resigning, even as they call it, look, it was perfectly legal, but it was bad judgment. So I think one becomes, frankly, a bit of a pariah. And I think it also leads to the likelihood oftentimes of succumbing to the pressure of the prosecutors and investigators in terms of flipping, because frankly, you kind of want that process to end as soon as possible. And, that's another leg of what we see as the present cooperation.
Yeah, it's very much an open question now. All right. Emily Compagno, thanks so much, Emily.
Thank you, Elaine.